Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome today for today's program on passing on the torch lecture by Dr. Ari Chacko. On behalf of the principal, Dr. Solomon Satish Kumar, I'd like to welcome all of you today, especially a very wonderful and pleasant evening where we can have Dr. Ari's family, especially his mother and extended family, and all the alumni of neurosurgery and SIRS batch of 7980, and all the other faculty and alumni who have joined us. Special welcome to also the students here. We are really lucky to listen to all our faculty like this, which is a privilege given to all of you to listen to their experience here at CMC. Just a little bit about what the passing of the torch lecture is. It's an institutional tradition here at CMC, where we recognize, honor, and appreciate superannuating faculty who have spent the best part of their lives contributing to the institution through teaching, research, surgical expertise, and administrative skills, to name a few. This is also an occasion where we wish this faculty God's blessings as they start a new phase in their life. Before we go on to the main program, I'd like to invite Dr. Arul Das to start this evening with prayer.
Let us look to the Lord in prayer. Loving and gracious God, our hearts are filled with thanks and gratitude this evening for bringing us together for this passing on the torch lecture by Dr. Ari Chacko. Thank you, Lord, for bringing him into this institution. Thank you for the way so many people received healing touch through him. Thank you for the number of students who learned from him. We pray for your continued blessings upon him. And even as we listen to his words of wisdom, we pray that you would inspire our hearts, open our hearts to listen. Make this time a blessed one. Bless our institution. May your name be glorified. In Christ's precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Arul Das. We'll start with a felicitation from Dr. Kenny David, Associate Director. He'll be talking on behalf of the Director, Dr. J.B. Peter.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a felicitation on behalf of the director who could not be here this evening. Dr. Ari George Chacko completed his schooling at Bishop Cotton's Boys High School in Bangalore. With a passion to become a doctor, he joined the MBBS course at Christian Medical College, Vellore, and belongs to the batch of 1980. During his student days, he, apart from studying and taking part in extracurricular activities, he met the love of his life, Dr. Geeta. He was the bass guitarist for both his class and Cochrane House. After completing his MBBS, he went on to complete his 2 years of service obligation at the CSI Mission Hospital in Gadag. With a special interest in neurosurgery, he joined the MCH course in neurosurgery in the year 1989. After completion of his course, he joined back as faculty in the Department of the Neurological Sciences. He developed a keen interest in research and skull-based surgery. He later went on study leave to the Baylor College of Medicine, Houston, Texas, and worked there in the Department of Neurosurgery. There he got opportunities for research in animal models, and he also spent a few months with Dr. Majid Sami, a surgical giant in skull-based surgery in Germany. After his return, he specialized and continued to excel in skull-based surgery. He pursued his interest in pituitary surgery and introduced several surgical nuances and improvised techniques for better surgical outcomes. He has published many articles and has more than 100 indexed articles with numerous citations. He has authored many chapters in the field of endoscopic pituitary surgery. And he has mentored many graduates and trainees who have gone on to establish departments of neurosurgery in India and overseas. He is known for his dedicated patient care and zeal for excellence. His wife, Dr. Geeta Chacko, is professor and head of pathology and belongs to the batch of 1981. Both their children did their undergraduation in CMC. Their daughter Shireen belongs to the batch of 2010, now completing her residency in Philadelphia, and Arman is from the batch of 2013, has just finished his service obligation after MBBS and is now working towards his post-graduation in urology. We thank Dr. Ari for his lifetime of service to this institution and for living out the motto, not to be ministered unto, but to minister. May the Lord continue to bless you and your family in the days to come.
Thank you, Dr. Kenny. Now I'd like to invite Dr. Mazda, a PG alumnus from CMC in neurosurgery. He's working now in Bombay to give his felicitations.
Now for the not so formal introduction. I wasn't even born when Dr. Chacko started his MBBS. My name is Mazda Terrell, and I'm a neurosurgeon currently practicing in Mumbai. And the reason I am here is that I trained in the Department of Neurological Sciences from 2005 to 15. And I wistfully consider it the best decade of my life. And a large part of that joy came from having trained under Dr. Chacko. So I'm just going to keep my part short and finish within the hour. Relax, I'm just joking. When I asked Ari, how long do I need to talk for? He said, I'm talking for 39 minutes. Just try and keep yours a little shorter than that. So we've amicably agreed on 35. I get my sense of humor from him. Ari's benevolence, his grace, his discipline, his rigor, his zest and enthusiasm have inspired me in unimaginable ways. And when I say me, I am referring to generations of medical students and surgeons. He taught an entire lineage to put on their neurosurgical chaddis and do susu in the proverbial neurosurgical pot. The first thing one notices about Ari, besides his good looks and his charisma and his charm, is that he is extremely welcoming and responsive. Whether you're a medical student, whether you're an observer from another country, a registrar from another unit, he's always inclusive. He'll never treat you like riffraff, which is what neurosurgeons across the world are boisterously famous for. You know, whenever you're doing rounds, he'll get a junior resident to ask a senior resident a question. He'll get an observer to make sense of the MRI. He'll get someone else to talk to the patient. He himself sometimes will write progress notes. And if you've performed an operation the night before, even a little bit of it, next day he'll ask you, how is your patient doing? Giving you the credit and the responsibility. He was an extremely cohesive force. He always kept the team together. You know, it's very common practice for residents when they come on rounds to pick up the chart and say, these are the lab values. He'll say, Bugger, put the chart down. Talk to the patient. Ask them whether they've slept well, whether they've eaten something, whether they've passed some stools, or at least farted. Because those were the measures of well-being in post-operative patients, especially the Bengali ones. Everybody is probably... So a Bengali patient really doesn't care that you've removed a 10-centimeter tumor from his head. All it matters to him is that Ari Chacko the next morning asks him in his German Bangla, Paikhana hoi chilo. And they're really delighted. They're really delighted. Are we winning or losing? Is one thing he would always ask when we came to the bed of a patient who was slightly on the fence in the ICU. And I would mumble, sir, his sodium is this much, but he's got fever. Okay, are we winning or losing? He wanted us as students to summarize everything we knew about the patient and come to a single pointed conclusion. Are we winning? And if we were winning, what do we do to keep winning? And if we were losing, how do we course correct to make things better? And what one learned from him was that the difference between triumph and disaster wasn't the willingness to take risks. He took risks, calculated risks, measured risks. The difference between triumph and disaster was the mastery of rescue. We learned that good surgeons don't fail less, they rescue more. And whenever we even went to discuss a consult with him, he'd say, what's the clinical diagnosis? And I would mumble, this is a 56. No. What's the clinical diagnosis? He wanted a certain preciseness and exactness. And that is what now we do with the residents that we train. We expect that exactness from them. We now call ourselves Chacklings, the tribe that has descended from the genius of Ari Chacko. To sound more aristocratic, we could call ourselves Aryans. He always shared his knowledge. He would come onto rounds and say, hey, listen, I read this Malcolm Gladwell book, and it talks about why plane crashes take place. And plane crashes take place because the co-pilot and the pilot don't talk the same language. Either they're from different countries, the co-pilot is too insubordinate and feels scared to talk to the pilot. And the next day, the rule in the OT was that if a junior surgeon feels that a senior surgeon is doing something risky, he should have the courage to speak up. So on days that we operated very late into the night, and I knew I had to close for 2 hours after he left and be in the OT the next morning, 2 hours before he came, I'd say, sir, this is extremely risky. And on days, I would get away with it. He inculcated a sense of music in everybody. He loves listening to music. And I think his genre is unheard songs of unknown artists. Over the years, to indulge us, he progressed to very famous songs or unheard songs of famous artists. I very vividly remember one day we were operating on a large opticochiasmatic glioma, and the anatomy was completely miscued, and we were lost. And his hands steadily inside the head of the brain, he leaned back on his chair and look on the computer and say, Bhaga, play the third song by Lennon. And I still remember the words of the song. The words of the song were, how can I go forward when I don't know which way I'm facing? How can I go forward when I don't know which way to turn? How can I go forward into something I'm not sure of? Oh no. And listening to the music, he intuitively finds his way, and in the next 5 minutes, the anatomy is exposed like a textbook in front of you. It was that brilliant. And then he'll give you trivia about the song, saying that the oh no is actually not an oh no, but the reference Lennon makes to his wife, oh no. And I mean, it was a great cultural upliftment for someone like me who grew up on Bollywood music in Bombay. And then he played occasionally songs by the Doors, the Carpenters, Dire Straits, but all unheard songs of them. And then we'd go back to the hostel room and actually listen to them, and the words were pretty philosophical. Later on, residents realized whenever he was in a foul mood, they would play his favorite song, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and then all calm was restored. He taught me, and when I say me, I'm referring to a generation of students and nurses to hold surgical instruments. It's extremely important that the nurse places an instrument very carefully into your hand, especially you want it to go into the brain exactly the way you're operating. And sometimes the nurses would fumble if they were new, and he would tell them in his very articulate English, sister, I don't have eyes on the tips of my fingers. And sister is very confused. And nurse doesn't understand what is going on. And then she would crane over and say, what is it? And I'd say, sister, just put the instrument properly in his hand. And then he would actually translate and say something. And then the sisters would actually figure out what he was saying. But the message here is that he wanted everybody to get better. He insisted that residents eat with a fork and a knife so that they use both their hands altogether. A far cry from how food is usually eaten in Tamil Nadu. But he wanted us to sit properly on the operating table, use the microscope ergonomically, and he wanted the anesthetists to do their role properly. He wanted the technicians to be precise with what they're doing. He himself didn't want to excel. He wanted to make sure that the entire team keeps doing better. And what we learned from him was that better was possible. It didn't take genius. It took ingenuity. It took diligence. It took a moral clarity. And above all, it simply took a willingness to try. He is an exceptional surgeon. There's no doubt about it. He is divinely gifted, supremely talented. He redefined the landscape of vestibular schwannoma surgery. When he trained, every patient came out on a Ryle's tube and a tracheostomy. And then he went to Germany, trained with Majid Sami. And after that, no patient on a Ryle's tube tracheostomy, almost none. Facial nerve outcomes improved dramatically, and almost even preserving hearing from the very nerve that the tumor arises from. He was so passionate about endoscopy. He went to Pittsburgh and trained and improved functional outcomes and resection rates of pituitary tumors. And he used to get so excited the next morning whenever a patient with a growth hormone tumor or Cushing's had a cure, and he would snap his fingers and you could see the excitement in his eyes, and he would relive the moments we had in the operation theater the previous day. I mean, I have probably seen 50 of the best surgeons in the world operate. After I finished from here, I went to North America, Europe, Japan, and I haven't seen anybody better. He took all the neurosurgical operations that were the final frontiers of neurosurgery: vestibular schwannomas, eloquent area gliomas, intramedullary tumors, and improved their outcomes dramatically. He even pioneered a technically demanding procedure called the oblique corpectomy, which nobody in the country does because of its technical challenge, but with excellent results. He's going to go, oh gosh, and cringe at all this praise because extremely shy. But he's truly deserving of it. He doesn't like to be the president of any society or take on any major administrative roles. He simply likes to go and have his fresh and honest coffee, eat some idli vada sambar, and then go to the farm and grow some crops. But you'll realize when he talks today, his clarity, his simplicity, his honesty shines through. And that's because he genuinely cares for his patients. I've seen him emotionally affected by their outcomes. He celebrates their highs and is despaired by their lows. I have learned from him that the scalpel can only go so deep. He replies to each and every single patient himself on email. He has no reason to. He can easily forward it to the secretary to do it. Every single email starts with, "I'm sorry to hear about your problems." And that is how every single email of mine starts now. And probably every single email of every single person who is trained across the world. He is exceedingly helpful. Till date, I send him images on WhatsApp and say, "How can you help me? What can I do with this?" And he'll say, "Knowing what I know, I'd do this. Or having grown this old, I'd only stick to this." He'll be very honest with his opinion. And I go ahead and operate the next day, and I've forgotten about his advice. And he'll call me and say, "Hey, Bhaga, how's the patient?" And he has no reason to be so concerned, but that concern is so genuine. I've even spoken to him during surgery. I remember one night I discussed with him a hypothalamic lesion, and I operated the next day and I couldn't find the lesion. And I put him on speaker and called him, and he was operating on a pituitary in Vellore. And listen, I told him, "I'm lost. I just can't find the lesion." And he said, "Listen, angle the microscope a little bit this way and look in that direction." And in 2 minutes, I mean, he saved my life. He saved my patient's life, all from 1,000 kilometers away. A large part of what he does, he owes to his teachers. Dr. MJC is a constant feature in his teachings. This is how MJC used to do it. These are Dr. Mathai's loops that I'm wearing. He always brought forward those teachings. And in a sense, all your teachings, sir, have been passed down to us via this medium. He's always talking about first principles, which are the building blocks of true knowledge. To get to the bottom of any issue, he would talk about first principles, the first basis from which anything is known, a truth that cannot be broken down any further. And it was Aristotle who actually coined the term first principles and described them. It's not without reason that Aristotle's nickname is Ari. Ari actually in Hebrew means lion. In another script, it means an eagle. That's where the word Ariel gets its root. So he's the ideal combination of raw and sour. He loves to celebrate. Loves to celebrate. He'll have a party on his farm. He'll go running with a resident, go cycling with someone else. I mean, he just likes everybody to enjoy with him. I mean, it's hard enough for any person to be universally liked. Forget a neurosurgeon. Ari is that one such person. The technicians and the nurses in the OT, they love him. The anesthesiologists love him. Interdisciplinary people, neurology, radiation oncology, endocrinology, radiology, everybody wants to discuss their cases with him. The office staff, the admin staff, they just love working with him because he's so easygoing. He gives them a hard time, but he's approachable. He really is, I mean, the center of so many universes. In conclusion, which is another 20 minutes, Ari would not be the man he is without the family he has. A famous surgeon once told me, if you're happy at home, you'll be happy at work. And Geeta ensures that. I remember when we used to finish a case or come out of OPD, he'd call her, hey Geeta, what's up? And 3-4 times a day, and she'd call him. And they'd whisper sweet nothings into one another's ears. 15-20 years into marriage, and just looking at them, I thought that was so adorable. They're constantly looking out for one another, and they're constantly looking out for everybody in their circle. And it's a big circle. A large part of what Ari is because Geeta has been able to multitask with the kids, time spent with him, her own professional career as the country's leading neuropathologists. I mean, they're just wonderful together. They're adventurous too. I think one of their anniversaries, they walked from Vellore to Bangalore until one of them got blisters in their feet. He loves his children to death. I remember in the middle of a busy OPD, if Shireen would call, he'll say, Bugger, Shireen's calling. And he'll answer her phone, and he's probably seen her 2 hours before at home. And he used to be so excited. Whenever he saw an interesting case, he'd call Arman, he'll call Shireen, look at this case, take some videos, take some photos. And if for any reason they were in class or they couldn't make it, he'd be horribly disappointed. And he plays the guitar with Arman and jams with him, and he teaches both of them how to sprint and the science of running long distance running, short distance running. I mean, he's 60. He turns 60 tomorrow. And he runs 10-20 kilometers every single day or every other day. He cycles across Germany with his brother. So, I mean, he's so multifaceted. He loves to read. He loves to write. He loves art. His operation notes are like poetry. When I asked him a couple of months ago when I came to meet him, what did COVID teach you? And he said, just doing neurosurgery is not enough. And that's why he probably learned how to bake bread. He never misses an opportunity to talk about his mother. Auntie Doreen, I just want to tell you that we know a lot more about you than you think we do. Whenever he did something risky in the OR, peeled off a tumor from a blood vessel, he'd say, if my mom was here, she'd say, you have more luck than sense. Or if I have done a case and it goes off really well, but the patient develops a complication or an infection, say, listen, I'm feeling horrible about it. He'd say, my mom would say, there is no peace for the wicked. So if you think you've raised only 5 children, you're probably wrong. through the wisdom imparted to your son, you've raised many, many more. God bless you with a healthy life. My dear Dr. Chacko, you inspire me to be a more definitive surgeon, a more humane doctor, precise clinician, a loving, doting father, a more involved father, a caring son, an adventurous husband, and an unconditional friend. And when I say me, I am referring to generations and generations of people you have impacted and inspired. It is an honor for all of us to honor you. Ladies and gentlemen, Ari George Chacko.
Thank you, Dr. Master, for giving us a wonderful insight into Dr. Ari as a surgeon, as a person, and as a friend. There are a few more messages that came along from other PG alumni. I won't name the names, I'll tell you later who they are, but Ari was one of the best surgeons produced by CMC. His dedication, planning, and surgical skills are excellent. He was innovative and had a legion of fans. He'll be surely missed. Ari Chacko is one of my favorite gurus in neurosurgery, has excellent microsurgical skills, which we all learned from him. So Dr. Ari, we're really happy that you could give us a talk today. You'll be giving us a talk. And before that, we'd like to felicitate you. The student president, Mr. Arpit Sadhu, would like to felicitate you.
Gosh, Mazda, that was really something. I mean, I'd got myself up to a point where I thought I'd be able to give the speech without having a quivering voice. But you've kind of done me in. Mazda had, he spent 10 years with us here, was really an outstanding resident and kind of raised the standard of our training program. I mean, you all know that it's not only the faculty who decide how good a program is, it's the residents that's in it. So thank you so much. I can't tell you how overwhelming this is for me. Here in the audience are almost all the people who are important to me in my life. Thank you very much for being here. I'd especially like to thank my family and friends who've come to Vellore specifically to help me across this threshold of turning 60. I really consider myself the luckiest person in the world to have had the opportunity to train here at the Christian Medical College Vellore. And it is indeed a privilege to be given the honor of this last lecture, or the passing of the torch, as you call it. The passing of the torch, I felt, kind of puts a lot of responsibility on me. So let's just call it the last lecture. But traditionally, the problem is that the last lecture is an event in academia in which professors are asked to think about their careers and give a final talk, assuming that because it was their last chance at doing so, that they would speak the truth. I can't guarantee that that's going to happen this evening. But I'd still like to present to you my background that was instrumental in designing my life's trajectory. To that end, I'd like to dedicate this last lecture to my parents. My father's no more, but my mother is right here in the audience. She's going to turn 97 in a few months. Just think about it. Exactly. That's what I thought. How many people in this world have had the opportunity to deliver a last lecture or even give a sermon at the age of 60 with your 97-year-old mother sitting in the audience? And she's not just sitting there. She's cognitively sharper than many of us, is highly critical. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little nervous how she will react to what I have to say. For instance, when I told her that I was going to Dhaka, Bangladesh, to work and leave CMC Vellore, she gave me one of those long, hard looks and said, "I say, old chap, I hope you know what you're doing and have thought this through. Don't do anything stupid." A fitting title for this talk. I'll begin with an 8-day cycling trip in Spain with my brother John. He's sitting right there in the front row on the right, and his wife Ermi and brother-in-law Ludwig in 2019, along the Camino de Santiago, a pilgrimage that's been going on for more than 1,000 years. We began in Pamplona, went on to Logroño, Burgos, Carrion de los Condes, León, Ponferrada, Lugo, Melide, and finally Santiago de Compostela, or the Cathedral of St. James. Legend has it that St. James, the cousin of Jesus, preached in the Iberian Peninsula, but was beheaded by King Herod when he returned to Israel in 44 AD. So his followers are supposed to have taken his mortal remains and buried them at Santiago, and the cathedral was built around it. So initially, the countryside was flat and bleak after the harvest. We passed many such quaint villages, large walled cities, impressive cathedrals, gigantic plazas, and with these tiny cobbled streets reminiscent of those paintings by Maurice Utrillo. Lovely welcoming cafes at night, and numerous such monuments and fountains. So we cycled up into the mountains, up above the clouds, down the other side, small streams flowed into larger rivers, and oh boy, what a feeling, getting to our destination at last. Tired, hungry, dirty, wet, but happy. We went straight to the cathedral office and picked up our certificates. They had a pilgrim office. And as you can see, there's a lot of Latin there, but my name is spelled correctly, which is the main thing. Of course, the lady who gave me the certificate said that although the probability of my getting to heaven had improved considerably, I would still have to be a good boy for the rest of my life. Now, you know how it is. During these long journeys, one tends to do a lot of reflecting and contemplating and analyzing and reading. I did do all of that. One monument in particular stuck home, the monument in Valladolid. We didn't actually go there, but it was close by and it helps in my story. A little background would be in order here. That's Valladolid, and these are the Straits of Gibraltar with the Mediterranean Sea on the east and the North Atlantic Ocean on the west. The Google image shows it quite well with the arrow passing through the straits, also known as the Pillars of Hercules. The Pillars of Hercules are essentially the rock faces of the two continents formed by the Jebel Musa to the south, that's Africa, the Rock of Gibraltar to the north, Europe. And this is the view taken from the Mediterranean Sea on a container ship. According to Roman sources, Hercules, for his 10th task, smashed through the Atlas Mountains, pushing the land masses apart, creating the Straits of Gibraltar, allowing the Atlantic Ocean to flood into the Mediterranean Sea. While Greek mythology holds that he pulled the two continents apart in order to prevent monsters from getting into the known world from outside. With our knowledge of continental drift, it's probably the Greeks that were right. Nevertheless, inscribed on those pillars are the words non plus ultra, which means either nothing more beyond or no further beyond, because they believed that that was the edge of the world, and it was a warning to sailors, don't go any further. And it was adopted as the motto of Spain, inscribed on their coat of arms, as you see here, non plus ultra, essentially shutting the door on possibility, exploration, and seeking. Now, you know how academics casually drop bits of Latin into everyday conversation to look important? So I was playing around with this phrase in my mind, and here are some possible uses. You could say, Dr. Sanjay Goval. Sanjay is my classmate from medical school and has remained a very good friend. You could say Dr. Sanjay Goval is the ne plus ultra of hepatobiliary surgery, because you don't have to go any further to find someone who can pull off a successful surgery like he and his team can. Or you could say, Dr. Sukesh Nair, he's sitting right at the back there, just back from Mexico. Dr. Sukesh Nair is the ne plus ultra of coffee making, because he can teach Mr. Starbucks a thing or two about espressos and Americanos. Sukesh, his wife Anu, and Madhavi have created a small group of friends who meet at their house every Sunday morning for coffee. We are fortunate to be amongst that group, and I say in all sincerity that it was that one ingredient that got us through the lockdowns during the recent pandemic. Getting back to the Straits, in the 1200s, the Romans, which is what the Italians were known as when nobody knew any better, used to sneak out of the Straits, go up to Portugal, get some port wine, on the way back, pick up some Moroccan lamb kebabs and come home for their weekend parties. But nobody till then had gone across the Atlantic Ocean. In fact, the feeling that there was nothing more to discover was so strong that non plus ultra was written across the edges of their maps. Now you notice here that this map from Ptolemy in the 2nd century is a little curved. So they obviously suspected that the earth was round. Now for the fact checkers in the audience, I'm sure some of you are Googling it already. I can't guarantee that they really thought the earth was round or flat at this time, because I wasn't there. But let's take a look at what we do know. These myths are from 1200 BC, when at that time, as you know, the earth was flat. And when the ancient Greeks woke up in 500 BC, they suspected that it was round. And then Eratosthenes in 240 BC went even so far as to measure the earth's circumference, and quite accurately, I might add. Therefore, how is it, why on earth had nobody circumnavigated the globe till the 1400s? Think about it, 1,700 years from Eratosthenes. My theory is that although the Greeks suspected that the earth was round, there was no class 1 evidence at the time, and therefore no self-respecting seaman would have wanted the dubious distinction of being the first to plunge headfirst over the edge along with his expensive ship just to prove that the earth was round. Just goes to show what a powerful inhibitory influence a piddly set of inscriptions on a set of pillars does, non plus ultra. Until one man acted on the conviction that there was, in fact, something more beyond, and he changed the world forever. 1492, Christopher Columbus set sail into unknown waters across the Atlantic to an unknown destination and discovered the Americas. Of course, He initially thought he'd reached India, but when he couldn't find any idli vade sambar and lungis, he realized his error. Now, I don't want to dwell on the terrible aftermath of his so-called discovery of the New World and the complete decimation of the indigenous population, but rather recognize it as the dawn of a new age of discovery. The world had awakened to new possibilities. So now back to the monument, which is obviously to Christopher Columbus. At the top of the monument is Columbus himself, on a boat tossed by rough seas. Standing over him is the angel representing faith, guiding him to his destination. The boat rests on a globe with a bronze band across the equator with the words non plus ultra. But the most interesting feature of the monument, the great thing about it, is on the other side. A lion tearing down the letter N from non, swiping at it with its paw and leaving plus ultra. Or there is more beyond if you dare to seek. There is more beyond if you care to work hard. There is more beyond if you have the intelligence to use your education and resources to push the boundaries of science and technology. And that is now on the inscription on the modern Spanish flag, plus ultra. Medical students, postgraduates, this is a challenge to you to seek, expand knowledge, break barriers, and prove us old fogies wrong. So this brings me to my second story. My father, Air Commodore Arthur Apollo Chacko, was a strong, confident man with firm ideas of right and wrong. He grew up in an accomplished family in Pallam, Kerala, which is not surprising because I'm told that most good Malayalis come from Pallam. That's a watercolor painting done by my father of his Wallapura ancestral home. It looks just like this today, except that now it has flushes in the bathrooms that did not exist when I used to visit in the 60s and 70s. His father, John W. Chacko, had plus ultra in his middle name. He was the principal of a high school in Kottayam, educated all his daughters, 3 of whom became doctors. One of them, Dr. Liza Chacko, founded the Department of Anatomy right here in Vellore. He divided the property amongst his sons and daughters equally, which was not the cultural norm at the time, and sent his youngest son, my father, to Banaras Hindu University at the other end of the country in 1934. Cultural barriers are sometimes more difficult to break than physical ones. I'll talk about my grandmother a little later. My father was an Air Force officer, did his flight training in Lahore, and during World War II was involved in the sea surveillance along the Arabian Sea and Bay of Bengal to prepare for the Japanese attacking India on 2 fronts. In 1944, he was posted to England as a flight lieutenant in the Royal Indian Air Force. My mother is German of Jewish descent. She was born in Hanover, Germany. Her father, Georg Frankel, was a lawyer. I got my middle name and my big ears from him. My older brother, John, who's sitting there right in front, got his intellect from him. He was a successful lawyer, my grandfather, quite intellectual, having got his PhD at the age of 21. Unfortunately, his career was cut short because of the Holocaust, but he picked it up again much later when he specialized in restoring lost Jewish property to its rightful owners. And my younger brother, Pierre, got his bald head from my grandfather. My grandmother, Elsa Frankel, was a sculptor. I mean, she was really stunning if you look at that picture. That was her studio in Paris. I think she had some form of synesthesia. This is when, there's some cross connection between your visual, auditory, and somatosensory inputs. Because she said, I hear only what my eyes tell me. My mother and sisters, Mariam and Elsa, have been working hard cataloging my grandmother's works and have created a foundation that you can check out if you're interested. And the next time you're in London, the Tate Gallery has one of her works on display. Plus ultra is stamped all over this family as they went through the horrors of the Holocaust. With Hitler and Nazism taking root in 1934, my mother and her family fled at various stages, leaving their belongings behind. My grandfather left for Amsterdam. My grandmother and Uncle Frank to England, and my mother and her grandmother went to Belgium and then England. In England, she joined the Auxiliary Territorial Services, the ATS, which was the women's branch of the British Army. It was instituted in 1938 for women to take on jobs normally held by men so that they could go and fight in Europe. My mother was a driver. Incidentally, Queen Elizabeth, she was Princess Elizabeth at the time, and exactly the same age as my mother, was in the ATS too, as a driver and mechanic. So it was in England that my parents met. However, they didn't get married. In 1947, my father returned to India as he was quite clear that he was not going to hang around in England, but would continue his career in the Indian Air Force. India had just achieved independence. So this could be the end of a sad story, but I'm standing here. So obviously, there was a time. My mother waited a year, and at the age of 24, set off from Southampton, sailed to India, reversing the route through the Straits of Gibraltar. She missed seeing the words non plus ultra because they were on the other side of the pillar, which is probably just as well. The rest of the journey to Bombay was uneventful. So they were married in Delhi. They broke barriers. They broke racial barriers at a time when these interracial marriages were not easy. Not that they're any easier now. I think they're just great. I vividly recall my first day in Bishop Cotton's 4th grade, when, as you know, the teacher gets all the kids to stand up and tell everyone who their parents are and what they do with their lives. My classmates' parents were lawyers, teachers, bankers, doctors, and some housewives. Can you imagine how proud I was to announce that my mother was an army truck driver in the war and that my father was a retired Air Force officer? Children of mixed marriages can be mixed up. Maybe we are, but I think we've done all right overall. This photograph was taken on my father's 90th birthday. That's my oldest sister, Dr. Mariam Chacko, who retired as Professor of Pediatrics, Division of Adolescent Medicine at the Texas Children's Hospital, Houston, Texas. She's now a distinguished professor emeritus at the same institution. My brother, Dr. John Chacko, trained as an aeronautical engineer from IIT Madras, got a PhD from Karlsruhe University in Stuttgart, Germany, where I was asking him, what did you do your thesis in? And he said it was in political science, which sounded kind of funny. And then he said that his thesis was on developing a mathematical model for multinational companies to be used in financial investments. He went on to be the executive vice president responsible for the pre-series center at Audi, the luxury segment of the motor car firm Volkswagen in Germany. My sister, Dr. Elsa Varghese, did her MD in anesthesiology here in CMC Vellore, was professor of anesthesiology at Kasturba Medical College, Manipal. Last year, she was the president of the Indian Association of Pediatric Anesthesiologists. And my younger brother, Pierre Chacko, an architect, trained at the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, his master's in urban design and town planning at UPenn, Philadelphia, and recently retired as director of long-range planning in the city of Dallas. What a lineup. I think if I were to distill all that I learned from my parents into two concepts, it would be A, it's through hard work that one gets to the stars, and B, we are citizens of the world, second to none. And it was on exactly these two principles, that formed the core of life here in CMC Vellore during undergraduate days. The unique feature of studying in this college was that I was thrown in with a bunch of really, really smart people who are now scattered across the world. I can say in all honesty that I learned as much from my classmates, seniors, and juniors as I did from the highly dedicated faculty. I now learn from people who are 15 to 20 years younger than I am. The neurosurgery residency was long and arduous and backbreaking. Drs. Chandy, Dr. K.V. Mathai, and Jacob Abraham were hard taskmasters who created an atmosphere of plus ultra with an emphasis on world-class neurosurgical care. Dr. Matthew Chandy broke barriers, bringing us into the modern micro-neurosurgery era with the introduction of the latest technology available. And then Dr. Raj Shekhar took academic publications to a whole new level, focusing on critical evaluation of patient outcomes. A neurosurgeon without a working knowledge of neuropathology is halfway towards being a moron. That's if you don't already consider him a moron for having chosen that specialty in the first place. And without good neuropathology support, he's completely handicapped. Dr. Geeta Chacko single-handedly modernized our neuropathology services, and more recently, incorporated molecular diagnostics through the initiative of Dr. Rekha Pai. There are only a handful of knowledgeable neuropathologists in the country, and she's one of them. There was no way I could keep up with the constantly changing classifications of brain tumors, particularly gliomas. And yesterday she tells me that they're planning to change the classification of pituitary tumors next year. So the best thing I could do was to get married to her, which I did. I considered Dr. Matthew Chandy my mentor. He was instrumental in pointing me in the right direction at 2 points in my career. That's what great mentors do. In 1996, he suggested I improve surgeries for vestibular schwannomas. And in 2002, he advised me to take a look at the cavernous sinus. Now, vestibular schwannomas arise from the vestibular nerves of the ear. They tend to be detected quite late in our population, so the tumors grow very large, making complete removal quite difficult and challenging, particularly if you want to save the facial nerve. The average operating time at Vellore at that time was about 8 to 12 hours, and sometimes 14 hours. Dr. Matthew Chandy suggested that I visit Majid Zami, an Iranian neurosurgeon who worked at the Nordstadt Hospital in Hanover, Germany. That's where my mother was born. And while I was there, my uncle Frank flew over from London to keep me company one weekend, and we tracked down the house on Bödecker Strasse, which was quite exciting for me. Professor Zami is a legend. His forte was a very efficient microsurgical dissection technique that lent itself well for the removal of vestibular schwannomas, as well as many other tumors such as intramedullary spinal cord tumors. Sami's operating time in vestibular schwannomas was about 3 to 4 hours. I spent 3 months in Hanover, funded completely by my mother, and that experience really changed my life. Upon my return, Dr. Matthew Chandy permitted me to independently apply these techniques to vestibular schwannomas and intramedullary spinal cord tumors. Our facial nerve outcomes improved, operating times reduced to an average of 5 to 6 hours, and today it is possible to post a second case after a vestibular schwannoma and still get home in time for dinner. So in this video, we're operating on an intramedullary spinal cord tumor. You can see the whole spinal cord is swollen. And we then have to incise the tumor in the midline, taking care not to go off onto one side. And then the tumor is immediately visible at a different color and texture. And then very gently, the cord is dissected off, and the tumor removed, preserving the vascular supply to the cord. And then the pia and arachnoid are fused together, so everything is as good as new. I'm fortunate to have worked with Dr. Srinivas Babu, our neurophysiologist. He's sitting right there at the back. He spent his entire career developing and perfecting the techniques for electrophysiological monitoring. In the operating room, we would interrogate neural structures in the head and spinal cord with these stimulating electrodes. And if we were near vital motor or language areas, he would warn us. And our outcomes significantly improved, and our ease of operating, the thought that we hadn't caused damage up to that point in time, was reassuring to us. So in 2002, I decided to visit Professor Vinko Dolenc. He lived in Slovenia, beautiful country in Central Europe, almost completely landlocked by Austria to the north, Hungary, Croatia, and Italy if you go clockwise. It has a tiny little beach onto the Adriatic Sea. This is important for my story. Beautiful country, 75% tree cover, waterways. Ljubljana is its capital, and this is the river Ljubljanka flowing through it. A little story about this dragon on this bridge. The myth goes that Jason from Greek mythology founded Ljubljana. He was the leader of the Argonauts, a band of 50 heroes who went by that name because of their ship, the Argos. Hercules, by the way, was one of the Argonauts. One of Jason's tasks was to fetch the golden fleece. The Argonauts set off from Greece, head up the Bosphorus, the Black Sea, and get to Colchis, which is in modern-day Georgia. After securing the fleece, their escape route back along the way they came was blocked off by the Colchians. So they had to head northwest. And they find the entrance of the Danube, head up the Danube. Remember, this thing is going upstream. The Danube drains into the Black Sea. They get onto the tributary, the river Sava, which continues as the Ljubljanka River. And then, unfortunately, in Ljubljana, there's a lake and then marshy area, and the river fizzles out. So the Argonauts are stuck. They can't get back home. But determined to get home, they dismantle the Argos, carry it overland to that beach on the Adriatic coast I told you about, reassemble it, and they're home free. Not to be one to get his fingernails dirty while all this ship dismantling was going on, like some people I know. Jason was wandering around, and somebody said that there was a dragon that was creating a nuisance in this part of the world. So he slays the dragon, and that's the dragon on the bridgehead. And that bridge is just beneath the hospital that Dolenc worked at. And this is highly relevant because Professor Dolenc was a pioneer in skull-based surgery and contributed hugely to approaches to the cavernous sinus. This diagram shows the cavernous sinus behind the globe on either side of the pituitary fossa there. And it's surrounded by important structures. That's the optic nerve, the internal carotid artery coursing through it. And the lateral wall has these many cranial nerves that move the eye, supply the face for sensations, and help you chew. Now, if you were to get into the cavernous sinus to take out a tumor, we would typically go under the temporal lobe and then incise into the cavernous sinus, which would obviously sever those nerves and render the eye immobile and the face numb. For these reasons, inscribed on the dura are some words. And if you put a microscope onto it, it's written non plus ultra. And rightly so. It really was a no man's land. Dolench broke that barrier. He decided to dismantle the sinus like the Argonauts did. Using the microscope, he drilled off all this bone on the sphenoid wing from an anterolateral trajectory. Reaching the exiting foramina of these nerves, he discovered that, in fact, the lateral wall of the cavernous sinus was formed of 2 layers. And with sharp dissection, he peeled off the outer layer, revealing those nerves intact, and then operated on the tumor between those nerves. Absolutely brilliant. But it's easier said than done, of course. I had read his manuscript 1,000,000 times without grasping the actual trick. But the scales fell from my eyes when I watched Dolench at work. I hurried back to Vellore. And that's the beautiful thing about my career at CMC. With the encouragement from the department, complete lack of impediments, along with the incredible caseload, we were able to accrue a massive series within a few years of solid work. Trigeminal schwannomas are the best tumors to remove using the Dolench technique. Here's an example. A 30-year-old man with headache and giddiness for a year, decreased facial sensations and some difficulty in chewing, and a massive tumor in the middle section of his head, extending out of one of the foramina outside the head. So with our ENT colleague, Dr. Reggie Thomas, we removed this portion of the tumor through the nose and the maxillary sinus, brought him back to the ICU, and the next day took him back into the OR and did a Dolench on him. We were able to remove the tumor completely. That's the post-operative scan showing no tumor. But more importantly, the patient is able to move his eyes quite comfortably. It is immediately apparent that as neurosurgeons, we are privileged to witness true miracles. The blind see, the lame walk, and the comatose wake up from the dead. On the other hand, as you can well imagine, great opportunity and great danger are 2 sides of the same coin. Clearly, we must continuously question ourselves and strike a balance between pushing the edge of the envelope, plus ultra, and stupidity. We can make patients blind. We can paralyze those who are walking normally before surgery. And yes, we can take lives. Highly educated, highly trained people can cause problems too, and they're the most dangerous. Let me explain. Here is an MRI scan of a patient with a pituitary tumor just entering the cavernous sinus on the right side. We access the tumor endoscopically through the nose, including the portion in the cavernous sinus with angled endoscopes. And the follow-up image looks good. And the patient also did quite well. Today, with advances in radiotherapy, it is not always necessary to remove tumors completely. Here is a growth hormone secreting tumor completely encircling the internal carotid artery. You can see that white spot out there. It is possible to expose the internal carotid artery, displace it medially, and operate lateral to that structure. We've done it. But the incidence of damage to the oculomotor nerves and the internal carotid artery itself are quite significant. A more sensible strategy would be to remove this portion inside the cella, suprasellar area, relieve the optic apparatus so the patient's vision improves, leave the portion in the cavernous sinus, radiate it, and you have good long-term follow-up. This young girl has bilateral vestibular schwannomas. You can see the smaller tumor there on the right side is much larger one here on the left. It would be devastating to give her a facial palsy. Instead, a subtotal excision, leaving behind tumor on the facial nerve, followed by radiation to the residue. resulted in good long-term control and good facial function. This brings me to the last part of the talk. At various stages in one's career, it is possible to fall into what I call a stupidity trap, where I denounce a particular surgery or strategy because I do not have the skills to perform that surgery. There are some situations where you have to remove tumors completely. You have to take those risks. And if you can't do it, then send it to somebody else who can. That's cardinal sin number one. Or, as shown in the previous two examples, I could go at a tumor hammer and tongs really aggressively, just to prove that I can remove the tumor and boost my ego. Cardinal sin number two. And such surgeries degenerate into personal battles between the surgeon and the tumor, with the patient being an innocent bystander. Many of us tend to be carried away by strong personalities, of all who make fantastic presentation at conferences, of all the heroic surgeries that they do, without giving us a true picture of all the sort of complications they face. Now, I have intertwined two threads through the talk: my family background and professional life. The time has come to kind of fuse them together and wrap up. How do highly trained neurosurgeons, or any professional for that matter, do stupid things? How do you explain the complete disruption of my mother's family through one of the darkest periods of German history? After all, Germany at that time was a country bursting at the seams with countless musicians, writers, philosophers, scientists. Here's one view. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Polish pastor, openly outspoken against Hitler and his regime that targeted innocent Jewish people. He was finally imprisoned and hanged in 1945 in Auschwitz, a few months before Americans liberated the camp. One of his essays, written in prison, was on stupidity. Now, I'll have to read this out. Every word is important. So I quote, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil, it can be exposed, and if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, in that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenseless." He goes on to say that reason seems to fall on deaf ears, probably because stupidity demonstrates group behavior or herd mentality, like listening to a guy making a fantastic presentation and following him blindly. And it has nothing to do with education. In fact, education can increase stupidity. So rather than being a psychological problem, it seems to be more of a sociological problem. It becomes apparent that every strong upsurge of power, be it of a political or a religious nature, infects a large part of humankind with stupidity, almost as if this is a sociological law where the power of the one needs the stupidity of the other. What is even more frightening is that everyone underestimates the number of stupid individuals in circulation. I have modified this graph from Cipollone. He's an Italian economic historian, and I've added my own thoughts. I'll have to be a little careful here because I noticed there's Dr. Pratap Tarian out there. He's a psychiatrist who retired about 5 years ago. It distributes people into 4 quadrants. Now, I know this is an oversimplification because all of us have a bit of each personality within us, but it kind of helps the argument. Along the x-axis is yourself. Do you benefit or do you harm yourself? On the y-axis is other people. Do you harm them or benefit them? So these are the intelligent people causing benefit to themselves and others, a win-win situation. That's the best place to be. These are the bandits or the rogues, benefiting themselves but causing harm to others. They can be dealt with by setting the cops loose on them. We have laws against them. We can punish them. These are the helpless people who benefit others but are taken advantage of and are exploited. We need social action to remedy this. But this is the most interesting quadrant. The stupid people. Not only do they cause loss to others, but inexplicably, they cause loss to themselves as well. We see stupidity today with suicide bombers who kill themselves and others. During this pandemic, there were millions of stupid people who refused to get vaccinated, harming themselves and dangerous to others. Bonhoeffer says that nothing can be done about them because they cannot be reasoned with and are unpredictable. He believed that only an act of internal liberation, almost like a moral transformation, was required to change things. Now, this is completely out of my league, and I leave it to you to kind of take this further. I haven't thought about this further. But you must be wondering what this gap in the middle, the origin of the graph is. The 0 point. These are the ineffectual people. They cause no harm, but they have no benefit to anyone, including themselves. I would think that laziness and procrastination fall into this category. And all of us have a good proportion of this lurking within us. The treatment is simple. We just need a good kick in the backside, making sure that the boot is pointed in the right direction so that we set off on a path to the top right quadrant. I thank all my family and colleagues for not sparing the boot with me. As I mentioned before, the medical profession is replete with examples of stupid behavior. We must rely on evidence-based medicine, establish protocols, and audit our performance to actually provide the data that is often lacking in the first place. Remember, when you present data from CMC Vellore, people sit up and take notice. I'm proud to say that from its very inception, the Department of Neurological Sciences, CMC Vellore, put all the above in place, and our role was to ensure that it continued. And finally, we come back full circle to close with some irony. Hitler thought that he would succeed in creating hatred for the Jews amongst all the stupid people of the world. And yet, when my father brought my mother to Palam, Kerala, to meet his mother, this uneducated, conservative, yet wise old lady said, "You who come from my Lord's tribe are most welcome here." And that's me sitting on her lap, looking proud of myself. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life. To enumerate them would entail another last lecture. But probably the most intelligent thing I did was marrying Geeta, who's been such a stabilizing influence on me. Right. And has stuck with me through all my ups and downs. Thank you, Geeta. I'm extremely proud of my two children, Shreen and Arman. I had them in mind when I was writing this lecture. But when I finished, it dawned on me that they are already professionals in their own right and have far surpassed anything that I have achieved when I was at their stage, plus ultra. Thank you.